let's talk about experience design in CRPGs. Specifically, let's talk about how it relates to level design, map design. We tend to get really focused on gameplay, like how many monsters are going to be in this map, what kind of monsters, what kind of groups do they come in, how often do you fight them, how long do you go before you get a full refresh, what kind of loot do you find, what's the exact layout of the map, how long does it take to do this, how long does it take to do that. But that's not the interesting part of a CRPG. It never was. I play CRPGs because I want to play a role in an adventure in a world. I want to be in that world having that adventure as someone who's supposed to be there. And in many cases, that just has absolutely nothing to do with the actual gameplay. I don't really care how many birds I fight on the way out of town. Maybe I find it interesting to level up my character and try and plan my builds, but it's not part of the adventure. To use a cooking metaphor, all of the emotionally important ingredients of our adventure could be considered ingredients. Like, in the distance, there are misty mountains. And in those mountains, beneath those mountains, is a dragon's horde. You are going to claim that horde. Maybe you think that sounds like a fun idea. Maybe you don't. It depends on whether you like that kind of adventure, right? But it's not an adventure yet. It's just a pitch. So you could call that an ingredient. We care about that dragon's horde because it sounds like it could be a fun thing to eat. So it's sort of like holding up a steak and being like, hey, look at this steak. Doesn't this steak look good? And some people will be like, yeah, that steak is going to be great. And some people will be like, no, I don't like steak. But either way, you're expecting me to cook the steak. You're not expecting me to slap it down raw in front of you and say, go do it. And it's the same with a CRPG. You get all these emotional beats, these parts of the adventure that make the adventure work. But they have to be processed. They have to be combined and heated and plated and served up. That's what the gameplay is for. All of that fighting and leveling up and wandering around maps, getting loot and all of that stuff, that's the cooking. Here's the important part, though. Badly cooked food is better than perfectly cooked air. And that's sort of what we seem to be forgetting these days. A lot of CRPGs come out and they're very carefully balanced to provide the correct number of fights per minute or whatever. But they're pretty short on ingredients, so it's like just getting nothing but an endless stream of baked potatoes. Yeah, they're perfectly cooked baked potatoes, but couldn't I have something else? Here's an example. Surely you've heard of Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. It's famous. If you've never played it, it is about being a new vampire and wandering around in a town. I think it's, Los Angeles? Where you just get to do new vampire things. And that is so rich in adventure. Everywhere you go is just packed to the brim with you being a new vampire in this world having these adventures. It's constantly selling you on the idea that here you are in this tangible world where you exist and you are doing things in this world as a vampire. And it's hard to overstate just how powerful that is in comparison to almost every other CRPG ever. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. Gameplay? Terrible. Stat stuff? Terrible. Map design? Terrible. But the ingredients, a billion ingredients come raining down onto your plate. Sure, some of them are charred, some of them are raw, but you can't help but be impressed by just this absolute cornucopia of adventure. The texture in this game is so amazing that it has never been matched, and that's why people still consider it legendary, even though nobody has beaten it. Because the pacing and the balance is so bad that you can only beat it as one specific build, and nobody does that build because it's not a vampire build. You have to be a gunman. So basically, out of the people who have played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, I'd say 1% have beaten it. I cheated to beat it. Despite that, it is a legendary game, and it deserves that legendary status because of the number of ingredients. Badly cooked food is better than perfectly cooked air. Of course, not all ingredients match. You know, if you slap down some salmon and then put ice cream on top of it, people are not going to be very well pleased. And you can see that sort of thing in some of the larger CRPGs like Mass Effect, any except for number 1, Mass Effect 2, 3, and whatever the Andromeda was, right? And I'm sure all the remakes and the remakes. The thing is, a lot of Mass Effect is on point. A lot of Mass Effect sells you on the adventure. You are the fascist space cop having this space adventure. Congratulations, and it really tries to sell you on that. But a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it is just side quests for the sake of adding content, and it really distracts. A really easy example of that is there is a mission where you have to track someone down, so you go and you hack a bunch of slot machines. Now, on the face of it, hacking slot machines to try and figure out who a criminal is and who's funneling money around, that's a cop thing to do. You can see that happening. But that's not what you do. I mean, that is a tiny piece of it, but this is like a big quest thing where you can rig the slot machines to get extra cash and all sorts of other stuff. And 90% of the side quests in this area just aren't right. They're not selling the correct adventure. If we were a scammy little sleazeball running around this citadel just trying to make our fortune, sure. But we're supposed to be an intergalactic fascist space cop. And this just doesn't seem very in character. This is so outrageous at times that it has become a meme. I'm sure you might have heard of it. I'm Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite shop on the Citadel. It's so inappropriate that it becomes part of the fun of the game, because it becomes clear that the game is not very good at taking itself seriously until it takes itself too seriously and explodes violently. The point of this is that you do need to make sure your experience design works, to make sure that your adventure is a coherent adventure. You've got all these ingredients, you need the right ingredients, and then you need to cook them. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you have a forest map. You're designing your forest map. And normally you might think, what enemies do you fight? And how is the map laid out? And, what loot do you get? And all that stuff. Instead, let's take it from an experience design perspective. What part of the adventure is this? What are we trying to talk about here? What are we trying to sell the player on? Are we headed out to those misty mountains with the dragon's loot beneath? Well, in that case, what we want to do is we want to sell the player on that part of the experience. So maybe we have breaks in the trees where you can see these distant foggy mountains. You really want to sell the player on that long range, that journey ahead. And maybe, as we get deeper into the forest, we keep taking peeks behind us, and the town is getting further and further and further away. And as we get deeper into the forest becomes wilder. It becomes a little bit more dangerous, a little bit less cared for. All of the loggers are gone. The woodsmen, they have faded away long ago, and we're left with just raw, ancient woods. It's still bountiful, but the bounty is now exotic and strange, rather than something humans have tamed and decided to eat. In this way, we can create a journey. We can sell the player on the adventure. They are moving into the deep woods, away from the town. They're moving out into places where no one has gone for quite a while. The human hands may have come through here, but nobody touched anything, and no record of it remains. This is truly the wild part of the wilderness. And then we can start introducing story elements like, well, we can have elves, and the elves aren't just like elves, because that's pretty boring, but these are like proper forest elves, where, yeah, they don't even speak human language, because why would they? These are people your species hasn't met in hundreds of years. The oldest of them, remember, the ancient kings that visited this place before you. This is how you get your foot in on designing a level. The point of the level is to be an experience, be part of that adventure. You are having an adventure in this world. Who are you? What adventure are you having? What sort of world are you in? Those are the ingredients that we have to actually put into our dish. And then, yeah, we want to cook them. So yeah, we do want to come up with enemies you fight. We do want to come up with a layout that you have to traverse. We do want to come up with what loot you get and what sort of pacing there is and all that jazz. But the most critical part is the ingredients. We have to know what we're introducing here and what we're trying to sell the player on. What sort of adventure are they having? What sort of world are they in? Who are they and how do they fit in? Once we know that, it becomes clear how the level will start to snap together. What sort of cooking times are required? What sort of chopping and mixing we might have to do. We have a level that stretches out from the town for quite a ways because the town gets further and further away. So obviously the level is going to have one-way traversals, which take a lot of time. Like, you get to a certain part of this map and you camp and you move on. You go around a mountain or something, right? This map has to be long, and obviously that's not all going to be the player manually traversing every inch of this map, but we have to sell the player on the idea that they are in these deep, deep woods far from town. We can't use the kind of spatial compression that's so common these days. The town cannot be 10 feet from the dragon's lair. We have to really sell that sense of distance if we want the adventure to work. We can repeat this process for everything, any adventure. But the point I'm trying to make is your ingredients are the most critical part. The adventure. Who are you? What adventure are you in? How do you fit into the adventure? How do you fit into the world? What sort of world is it? These are the things that actually matter, and they will shape the actual gameplay. The gameplay is just how you serve those things up, how you arrange them so they make sense and actually have impact. And even if you do that part badly, if your ingredients are good, you will be legendary. Even if your game is so badly balanced that nobody can beat it. At least that's my opinion. See you around.